There's always this fan debate about what is and what is not a Christmas movie. Is Die Hard a Christmas movie? For me, the movie Hook, Steven Spielberg, starring Robin Williams, that is a Christmas movie for me. Now, Christmas is in the movie. The story takes place over Christmas time. But the movie was released in December of 1991, and I associate that Christmas of that year with Hook. I was Hook crazy. I got all the action figures for Christmas. I had the soundtrack on cassette. I had the novelization, which I read more than one time. And I believe I even had the poster on my wall. And then after Christmas, I think it was in February, we got the game for the Nintendo Entertainment System. Then the Super Nintendo followed and the Sega Genesis. My childhood, that season, the winter of 1991 into 1992, is really just consumed with Hook. And it's now over 30 years later, and I still love the movie. And it's still just, when I think about Christmas, I think about Hook, because it's so rooted in my traditions. It's a movie that works in spite of a lot of flaws, and we're going to talk about some of those flaws here. Now, look, my intention is not to spoil Hook for you. Hopefully, you've seen Hook, and you can listen to a conversation about some of the merits of the film. So there's probably going to be some mild spoilers here. But essentially, what I love about the movie is the themes of the movie, which is that you have to hold on to childhood. You have to hold on to that innocence, that wonder. But also, the movie tells us that you can't live there. You have to bring it with you. You can't stay in Never Never Land. You do have to grow up, but you got to hold on to your childhood too. I think it's Steven Spielberg letting go of that. They talk. There's lengthy dissertations in Dawson's Creek about Steven Spielberg and his Peter Pan phase. Peter Pan, of course, like The Boy That Never Grew Up. A lot of Spielberg stuff for like a decade there, right? It's very kid friendly. It's very kid, like E.T. And then you like a trace a through line there, like growing up in the suburbs, that kind of a thing is a theme in a lot of Spielberg movies. And then we get to Hook. He did not have a great time making Hook. Steven Spielberg had such a difficult time with the crew, the cast of young actors, that he was like, I don't know that I ever want to do this again. And he kind of didn't, if you think about it. If you look at his resume, that was kind of the last stop for like kid-friendly Steven Spielberg. He had the BFG later, but and Jurassic Park does have a couple of kids in it, but it's not a kids movie. It's a popcorn movie. But like, look at that. So Hook is 1991. A couple of years later, Jurassic Park. Then there's The Lost World, right? But then we've also got like Schindler's List and Amistad and Minority Report, and then it's just like this whole. It's like the door got closed after Hook. That's what it feels like. I think it's him kind of saying goodbye to that. Whatever that was, that moment, that era of his career. It's beautiful. There's a lot of things about the movie that are beautiful. So Robin Williams plays Peter Banning, or AKA, this is the grown-up Peter Pan, who has forgotten that he was ever Peter Pan. Now he's a high-stakes corporate lawyer who is so consumed with work. He's a workaholic that he's missing his own kids. He's missing being a part of his children's lives. And he's married to a woman who is, a descendant of the real Wendy, who is saying, slow down, you're missing everything. All this is great. And I identified, and as a kid, I was like, well, Peter Pan, like what? I don't want to do that. Now, 30 plus years later, I'm on the other side of that. I'm like, it's so easy to get consumed by work. It's so easy to miss big moments in your child's life. I see, like, I've come full circle with it now, which maybe is why I have such a more, like, there's so much more nostalgia for me now, because I'm like, oh, it was like, I miss that innocence of childhood. Let's talk about the Wendy character. So it's Maggie Smith, who is playing a 92-year-old character, and I always thought, like, before Harry Potter, I was like, this woman has got to be ancient, right? She was in her 50s. It was just a really great makeup job. So she's great. We've got Dustin Hoffman giving a scene-chewing performance as Captain Hook. We've got Bob Hoskins as Smee. Julia Roberts as Tinkerbell, which really, I loved it at the time because I'm of the generation who, like, they always called them the young guns, right? Kiefer Sutherland, that generation of it was after the Brat Pack. Whatever that late 80s, early 90s scene was, like Flatliners is what I'm talking about. So we got Julia Roberts, who was 1 year after Pretty Woman, right? So huge star. She's miscast as Tinkerbell. She does not work as Tinkerbell. And look, by all reports, she was difficult to work with. She did not like being trapped on a green screen for most of the time. There was a whole thing breaking down. I mentioned Kiefer. There was a whole, because they were going to get married and then the wedding fell apart and she left. I think they were in the middle of production and she left and went to Ireland or something like that. So I look back on that now. A lot of the stuff with Tinkerbell, I just don't think it works. What is interesting when you revisit this movie now with like someone who's seen thousands and thousands of movies and knows how movies are made now, it's really uneven. All the stuff, like the bookend in London at the beginning of the movie, the bookend at the end of the movie, I think that's great. A lot of the stuff on Neverland, the Neverland stuff, it doesn't flow. I feel like there are pages missing from the screenplay, and there are some deleted scenes I know the 4K's got some deleted scenes. They don't help fill in anything. Here's a case in point. So Peter Pan is going. Well, he's Peter Banning at this point. He's setting up this big showdown with Captain Hook. 3 days, you guys. He's going to be whipped into shape in 3 days and like prove he is the Pan. He's the Pan. And so he ends up like getting bounced off a plank and falling into the water, and it almost drowns. And like it looks like he does drown, and like some mermaids come up and like give him air. The next thing we know, he's being lifted in this oyster shell up to the Lost Boys place. Tinkerbell's asleep. I'm like, hold on, how much time passed here? It's like, if you feel like 15 minutes got cut out of the movie. I'm like, what is going, or at least 10. Like, what happened? There's a lot of stuff like that where it's like, it just feels like chunks have been removed. Here's what we know about the movie. It was conceived by Nick Castle, the guy who's inside the Michael Myers suit in Halloween. The Shape is who we're talking about. And Nick Castle would go on to be, he directed The Last Starfighter, right? Great creator, great director, great filmmaker. One of John Carpenter's guys. By the way, Hook, shot by Dean Cundy, another John Carpenter guy. Great cinematographer. Hook looks like $1 million. Nick Castle had brought this thing, he had been working on it for years. And then the studio's like, but Spielberg wants a crack at this. So we're going to take this from you and give it to Spielberg. That's not great anyway. It's supposed to be like a $30 to $40 million budget movie. It ended up being $80 million. It was supposed to be, I think, like a 72-day shoot. Ended up being like 116 or something like that. It was like a 4-month long shoot. So huge production, problematic production. You can read about the problems online. It's not my intention to just break this thing down for you. You can read about the problems online. But it was intended to be this one thing. It ended up basically eating Steven Spielberg's lunch is what happened. It was he thought he could crack the flight suit. Like, how do you make somebody look like they're flying without it looking like they're on wires? He couldn't figure it out. There's a lot of things that he wanted to do, and he just wasn't able to do it. And I think he looks back and says that he wasn't present like he needed to be present on that production. The crew, the cast, he just did not have a good experience making that film. A lot of that comes through. A lot of that you can tell it just doesn't quite click in a lot of ways. But when you're a kid, which is, a lot of us come to this movie, we came to it as children, and you don't care about that. That doesn't matter. All that you know is that this is a story of Peter Pan. It's a story of Neverland, but we've never seen it like this before. And when that movie came out, there've been a few Peter Pan adaptations. Well, a lot of Peter Pan adaptations since then. It had never been done like that. Big production studio values. Peter Pan was a play. It was a cartoon. We all love the Disney cartoon. We'd never seen it like this. But then again, we'd never seen it with all of these weird elements. Okay, here's another question I have for you guys. The alligator at the end, the crocodile. See, here's what I'm wrestling with, because I'm watching this movie again. I watched it before I recorded this video. I was like, is everything that happens in Neverland imagination? Is it just a dream? Because you can argue that. I think that's kind of an interesting approach for the original Peter Pan, the original story, is that, because that's why, Captain Hook is the dad, right? I mean, it's like all these characters have dual roles. It's like, well, I think this is just a child's imagination. They're taking what they know and imagining this other thing. So like maybe that applies to Hook. It doesn't. It doesn't play by those rules. It plays by, like, it's a weird mix of fantasy and imagination, but then also like, and this is the thing, this clock that's been stuffed and sitting there just ate him and digested him and burped him. And you're like, well, but what? So there's a lot of things you kind of have to take on faith. Dustin Hoffman is great. I think, I don't love Dustin Hoffman in big studio roles. Like Marathon Man, great, right? The Graduate, great. I don't love Hoffman in big budget studio movies. But he's really good as Captain Hook. And it's this larger than life thing, and his relationship with Smee, played by Bob Hoskins, is really something I don't think we've necessarily seen before. Bob Hoskins looks like he's having a great time too. Just a couple of years after Who Framed Roger Rabbit, but he looks like a completely different guy. This movie's packed with great actors. We got Glenn Close in a cameo that if you're not looking for her, you will miss her. Phil Collins in a cameo. David Crosby has a role in the film. It's just really well done. In a lot of ways, it just breaks down in certain areas. Like all this stuff with Rufio, I don't really get a lot of it. The movie logic, it doesn't necessarily play by a set of rules. It doesn't follow its own set of rules. It never really fully, properly establishes how we're supposed to interact with this environment. Like what is real, what is not real. So Peter Pan's been gone for 30 years, right? He's been gone for 30 years. But in some ways, it's like he just left. Like Captain Hook wants a war. What has he been doing for 30 years? What have the Lost Boys been doing for 30 years? How did Rufio come to power? How did he come to be the leader? So many questions that I'll never get the answer to. But at the end of the day, it's a beautiful movie about like what it's about. It's about childhood, right? It's about holding on to childhood, holding on to that sense of wonder. Carrie Fisher and George Lucas cameo too. Do you guys know about that one? That's a fun one. Some of the best lines in the movie are from Carrie Fisher. There's a line of dialogue that Julie Roberts as Tinkerbell delivers where she says, that place between sleep and awake where you still remember your dreams. That's a Carrie Fisher line. God, I miss Carrie Fisher. Rest in peace, Carrie Fisher. You were the best. Love you so much. There's a lot of good stuff here. When you just go with the feeling that it gives you, it's magical. And it makes the last line of the movie all the more powerful because we know what happened to Robin Williams, right? We know his end. But the last line of the movie, he says, to live is an awfully big adventure. And I love that because I want to carry that with me, is to have that sense of wonder and adventure. And there's a duality there because of what happened to Robin Williams, but that makes the movie sweeter to me in that way because it's an awfully big task to live up to that adventure too. So that's, Hook. I love it. It's part of my Christmas tradition. I don't think it's perfect. No movie is perfect, and it's got a lot of problems, but I love it in spite of those problems. And it makes me feel reminiscent. It reminds me of being a kid, back when I was on the cusp. Because that's what it comes down to. That movie hit me just the right time when I was on the cusp of no longer being a child, moving into that next phase. And I've always kind of held on to that. It's like, don't lose yourself. Don't lose that sense of wonder. And sometimes we do. Sometimes I do. But I got to remember, hold on to it. That's what Hook does for me. What about you guys? What do you think about Hook? Let's continue the conversation in the comments below, guys. Thanks so much. Take care. Till next time. I appreciate you. I will catch you later.